أهلا بكم مشاهدينا الكرام إلى هذا اللقاء الخاص الذي نستضيف فيه مساعدة وزير الخارجية السابقة باربرا ليف. مرحبا بك سيدة باربرا ليف، وشكرا لك على تخصيص هذا الوقت للقائنا.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
كما تعلمين هناك مفاوضات تجري بين الولايات المتحدة وإيران تشترط فيها واشنطن تخلي إيران عن برنامجها النووي مقابل تطبيع العلاقات. من خلال خبرتكم السابقة، هل ترون أي نتيجة لهذه المفاوضات؟
So I don't think I would say in exchange for normalization. This is an opening move from all accounts, from the public statements, also from private reflections. It appears that it was a productive and positive atmospherics, but it's just a first step. And it's the nuclear piece and it's sanctions relief. So that's a far cry from normalization. And in fact, I don't see anything to indicate that on the Iranian side they're interested in real normalization of relations.
كيف تقيمون ضربة عسكرية توجه لإيران في حال لم تنجح هذه المفاوضات؟
So every president that I can recall has very explicitly not ruled out military use to prevent a nuclear weapon acquisition by Iran. President Trump has certainly put out a lot of statements suggesting he would move to that. And on the other hand, I do take him seriously when he says, and he has said this for some time, that he doesn't want his legacy to be a new war. But there's a lot of pressure points in between no war and war. So he has many tools at his disposal.
سيدة باربرا ليف، الرأي العام في منطقة الشرق الأوسط يوجه لإدارتكم السابقة انتقادات كثيرة في تقوية أذرع إيران بالمنطقة. كيف تردين على هذه الاتهامات؟
I don't buy that at all. Look, Iran has worked on a strategy for 4 decades, starting with Hezbollah, but moving on progressively to other militias that it sponsored, that it created on the battlefield in Iraq, for example, or enabling and training a pre-existing group, Ansar Allah, and giving them advanced weaponry. So no, that is not the U.S. That is not the U.S.'s fault. That was a decision by successive generations of Iranian leaders to do that, and it's been highly destructive as an approach to the Middle East.
لكنكم تعاملتم مع الحوثي كسلطة أمر واقع، وفي النهاية تبين لكم من خلال تصريحاتكم أنهم مزعزعين للاستقرار العالمي. هل أخطأتم التقدير في البداية؟
Oh, I would not agree with that statement. We did not treat them as de facto rulers. Yes, you could call them, they rule Yemen. They don't govern Yemen. They have not looked after the needs of the Yemeni people, and indeed they came to power by force and overturned and elected a legitimate government. We dealt with the Houthi to try to bring about a peace process. But that's what you do with combatants.
ننتقل للحرب في غزة. لماذا لم تنجحوا في وقف لهذه الحرب؟ ما العوائق الأساسية؟ وهل تتحمل إسرائيل مسؤولية تعنتها لاستمرار هذه الحرب؟
Look, the ceasefire failed for a number of reasons, but I would go back to the origins of the conflict, which were the shocking events of October 7th. And the fact is, at this point, 18 months on, with the degree of destruction, the loss of lives, the loss of homes, the loss of futures for the Palestinians of Gaza, the notion that Hamas is gaining anything by holding these poor people is nonsense. Now, the ceasefire that needs to come about is one that would deal with what happens to Gaza after the war is over. And frankly, I don't believe that that's something, that's a situation in which Hamas should be at the table. But I would suggest that Israel ought to be negotiating with Palestinian Authority over where Gaza ends up.
ولكن ألا ترين بأن نتنياهو يرغب في استمرار هذه الحرب من أجل تحقيق أهدافه السياسية للبقاء مدة أطول في الحكم؟ التقديرات تشير إلى أن قدرات حماس الأساسية انتهت.
Well, I think it's, look, you hear a lot of different things coming out of Israel. You hear a lot of Israelis speculating that he is continuing the conflict in Gaza at a lower level because of coalition needs, for instance. I think there are a variety of factors at play, but one of the factors, one of the key issue in my mind is that Israelis, the Israeli government, the Israeli prime minister, but the government have not come up with a viable future for Gaza, for the lives of Palestinians, and how they can reconnect with the West Bank. And so, in a sense, this constant military operation, which has a quest to bring back hostages, is at risk of simply keeping Israel in a perpetual sort of quagmire, but without the other goal of ending Hamas as a force.
هل طالبتم بشكل واضح بنزع سلاح حماس خلال المفاوضات التي تجري من خلال الوسطاء قطر ومصر؟
So I stepped down from government in January, and at the point that we ended, the Biden administration ended its term, Secretary of State Blinken, on January 14th, in a speech to the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C., laid out a set of concepts, proposals that we had worked up over the course of the preceding months. We envisioned a set of essentially three tasks, defining the terms for post-conflict governance, post-conflict security, post-conflict reconstruction. In no way could we imagine a stable setting in which Hamas would have a security role or a governance role. So ultimately, yes, we, like I think the current administration, like Israel, wants to see Hamas out of the picture entirely as a security, as a military force. But the question is, how do you get there? How do you get Hamas to disarm? How do you, you can't defeat it entirely. You certainly can't defeat it politically by military means. And the Israelis have had a hard time finishing it as a military force as well. But yes, we envision that Hamas would no longer have a role in governance or security.
كيف تقيمي مقترح ترامب أن تكون غزة منطقة تجارية تدار أمريكيا؟
So I think that was a provocative proposal to get other people to get serious about a proposal for Gaza, to bring an end to the war and to resolve to get Gazans back on their feet, or to get Gaza and Gazans back. I don't think it was a serious proposal, but I think it was a message to Egypt, to Jordan, to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and others, come up with a better idea. I think that's the purpose of it. I don't see a scenario in which the U.S. would participate in removing Palestinians from Gaza. I just don't think they will, or that the U.S. will do so.
نذهب إلى الملف اللبناني وأعود بذاكرتك إلى الوراء. هل أبلغتكم إسرائيل باغتيال حسن نصر الله؟ وهل الفكرة كانت مطروحة أمريكيا؟
So those are the subject of diplomatic discussions, as we say. And so I can't really go into those kinds of details. But I think it's fair to say that in the course of months, really starting soon after October 7th, the Israeli military and the Israeli leadership became very concerned about a two-front war in trying to get their hostages back, fight Hamas, that the conflict could escalate on the part of Hezbollah. And by the summer, it became pretty clear that they were going to reprioritize taking care of Hezbollah. So I think it is, obviously the conflict in Lebanon came about with great loss of life, great destruction and suffering. And on the other hand, there's now, for the first time in 4 decades, the opportunity for the Lebanese to regain their sovereignty, which was steadily destroyed by Hezbollah.
هل كان لديكم علم بعملية البيجر؟
I was not personally aware of it, no. I can't speak for the entirety of the U.S. government, but it was, it dealt a pretty devastating blow, I will say, to commanders in Hezbollah.
إلى أي حد ساعدتم إسرائيل في حربها ضد حزب الله؟ البعض يشير إلى أن لم يكن بإمكان إسرائيل فعل ما فعلت دون مساعدة من الجانب الأمريكي.
Yes, the IDF could act alone. Yes, I can't really go into the details of military or policy discussions at the time, but the IDF has had pretty good intelligence about Hezbollah for some time, and I think it reached a point in the conflict, in this sort of constantly escalating exchange of fire between Israel and Hezbollah. Nasrallah played a very, very dangerous game ultimately, and he was playing with the fates and fortunes of the Lebanese state, of Lebanon itself. And he completely underestimated how precarious a position he personally and the organization had brought itself to.
كنت أول مسؤول أمريكي زار دمشق بعد سقوط الأسد. كيف وجدت السلطات الجديدة؟
So let me talk first about Syria, the new Syria. The most vivid sense I had that day in Damascus was this almost a cloud of euphoria, that there was just such an electric feeling of excitement on the part of the public, on everybody I met, on the part of everybody I met, whether it was civil society activists, the white helmets, staff at our embassy who had been looking after our facilities and who were very eager to see American diplomats come back, ordinary Syrians that I spoke to as we were waiting for one thing or another, some of the HTS soldiers. There was such a sense of excitement and really euphoria. On the part of the leadership, on the part of Ahmed al-Shara, I found a very clear-sighted understanding only 12 days in, because I met with him on December 20th. He only got to Damascus a few days after Bashar fled. He already had a very keen sense of the enormous set of challenges, economic, security, and you might say social, cultural challenges that were piling up. So it was an interesting contrast. In the streets, talking to Syrians, they were simply over the moon. They were so happy, so relieved. There was almost a sense of disbelief that they could talk freely, that they could say anything they wanted. And on the part of the leaders themselves, they were very sober about all the tremendous challenges that awaited them.
التقيت الشرع؟
Yes.
كيف كان؟
So he came across as very thoughtful. He came across as politically astute, not simply a military commander, but already somebody who had taken on a mantle of political leadership. He struck me as pragmatic, non-ideological, which is not to say he doesn't have an ideology, but he was not wearing his ideology, if you follow me. And the language he used was language that was very welcome to many ears, not just foreign ears, the ears of Syrians. But the question hangs over him still, 4 months later. What are his intentions? Will he continue to govern in a way that is satisfactory to Syrians who have been through 50 years of hell, who had literally no freedoms? Will they really enjoy full freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of organization? Will Kurds and Druze and other communities enjoy the fullest expression of their cultural and other rights? How is he going to manage all the security? And he has extremists who fought alongside him. The question that always hangs over him is he an extremist? In his discussion, he does not come across that way. And I've heard that from a number of senior officials and leaders in the region who've met with him as well. But in the end, he will still have to prove what he is all about. but most importantly to the Syrians, to the Syrian people.
هل كنتم على علم بتحضيرات هيئة الشام لإسقاط نظام بشار الأسد؟
No, but,
البعض يشير إلى أن وصول الشرع للسلطة كان بموافقة أمريكية.
no, but they weren't aware that their march on Aleppo would lead to him fleeing Damascus. I mean, they said themselves, they did not, when they set out for Aleppo, they had a plan for Aleppo. They had a plan to take it, and they had a plan to secure it, and they had a plan to govern it. But then the way opened up to Hama. They thought they'd have a fight, but they didn't. And then the way opened up to Homs, and then it's, well, we're on the way to Damascus. So they didn't have a plan to go to Damascus, at least not in November and December. So it came about in a rather fluid way, and fortunately with very limited casualties and virtually no destruction.
البعض استغرب سرعة الاعتراف والقبول الدولي بالسلطات السورية الجديدة، خصوصا وأنها كانت إدارة مطلوبة أمريكيا. كيف تفسرين ذلك؟
So look, he is still designated as a terrorist under US law. HTS is still designated as a foreign terrorist organization under US law. However, the decision that the Biden administration leadership made was that we should reach out and engage and see and test him, even though we had only those few weeks left in the administration. But we believed that it would be a huge mistake to keep away. And indeed, when Secretary Blinken and we met with other ministers in Aqaba on December 14th, it was quickly agreed by all, including governments that felt very uneasy with this notion of these Islamist extremist coalition taking power. It was quickly agreed that everybody should begin engaging and see what this leader was about. And so that was the logic of it.
سيدة باربرا ليف، شكرا جزيلا لك على إتاحة الفرصة لهذا اللقاء.
Thank you.
والشكر موصول لكم مشاهدينا الكرام على حسن المتابعة والإصغاء. إلى اللقاء.